They told her she had no choice, that her life, her body, her future, all of it belonged to a man she'd never met. A duke wrapped in rumors of cruelty and death. Her father called it duty. Society called it honor. Scarlett Hayes called it a prison sentence. But here's the thing about caging a wildfire. It doesn't go out. It burns hotter. This is the story of a woman who refused to be owned, and the broken man who learned that control isn't the same as strength. Stay until the end to see how their war became their salvation. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and smash that like button if you believe some people are born to rewrite their own fate. The rain came down like judgment. Scarlett stood at the window of her father's study, watching water turn the London streets into rivers of mud and misery. Behind her, the fire crackled, too warm, too comfortable for what was about to happen. She knew. She'd known since the summons arrived 3 days ago, terse and commanding. Come home. Immediately. Her father didn't waste words on pleasantries. Sit down, Scarlett. She didn't turn around. I prefer to stand, Lord Edmund Hayes sighed, the particular sound of a man whose patience was a performance, already rehearsed and wearing thin. This isn't a negotiation. Then why pretend to ask? The silence that followed was weighted, dangerous. Scarlett watched a carriage struggle through the flooded street below, horses straining against their traces. She understood the feeling. You will marry the Duke of Blackthorn. The words landed like stones thrown at glass. For a moment, Scarlett thought she'd misheard. Then the reality settled. Cold, immovable, absolute. She turned slowly. Her father sat behind his massive desk, every inch the decorated general, the peer of the realm, the man who'd built a fortune on other people's obedience. His face was granite. No. Edmund's jaw tightened. I beg your pardon? I said no. Scarlett's voice didn't shake. She'd learned early that showing fear to her father was like bleeding in shark-infested waters. I won't do it. You don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not for you. Edmund stood, and despite herself, Scarlett fought the urge to step back. He was a big man, built for intimidation. Not anymore. You've embarrassed this family for the last time. Breaking your engagement to Lord Pemberton, he was sleeping with half of London. Humiliating us in front of the entire ton, refusing every suitable match I've arranged. Suitable for whom? You or me? Edmund's fist came down on the desk hard enough to make the inkwell jump. Enough! The word echoed in the study. Outside, thunder answered. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled, which somehow made it worse. You are 23 years old, unmarried, without prospects. Every decent family in England knows you're ungovernable, willful, damaged goods. Each word was chosen to wound. Scarlett felt them land but refused to flinch. The Duke of Blackthorn has made an offer, a generous one. He needs a wife. You need a husband. The arrangement benefits us both. What does he get out of this? A woman who doesn't want him? He gets a wife from an old family, connections, an heir eventually. Edmund's expression was cold. What he does with you after the wedding is his concern. The casual cruelty of it stole her breath. You're selling me. I'm saving you from spinsterhood and ruin. He sat back down, suddenly looking tired. You should be grateful. Blackthorn is powerful, wealthy, titled. Most women can go to hell, and so can you. The slap came fast, not hard enough to knock her down, but sharp enough to leave her cheek burning. Scarlett's eyes watered, but she didn't make a sound. Edmund looked at his hand as if surprised to find it raised. Then his face hardened again. You will marry him. The contracts are signed, the settlement agreed upon. In 3 weeks, you will become the Duchess of Blackthorn, whether you walk to that altar or I have you dragged there in chains. Scarlett touched her cheek, felt the heat of it. And if I run? Where? Edmund's smile was bitter. You have no money of your own, no property, no family who'll shelter you against my wishes. Your mother is dead, your brother cares only for his commission, and your aunt lives on my generosity. Run if you like. See how far you get before I find you and bring you back. He was right. She hated that he was right. The Duke is arriving tomorrow to meet you. You will be civil. You will be charming. You will accept this with grace, or I swear to you, Scarlett, I will make your life so miserable that marriage to a stranger will seem like mercy." She wanted to scream, to throw something, to burn the whole house down and dance in the ashes. Instead, she lifted her chin and met her father's eyes with every ounce of defiance she could muster. "I'll meet him. I'll marry him, if that's what you've decided for me." Her voice was quiet, deadly calm. "But you should know something, Father. You can force me into a church. You can make me speak vows. But you can't make me be the obedient little wife you're hoping to trade me for. This Duke of yours? He's getting a wildfire, not a candle. And I promise you, I will make him regret this arrangement as much as I already do." Edmund's expression didn't change. "That sounds like his problem, not mine." "Then we're done here." She walked out before he could dismiss her, before he could see the tears finally burning their way free. She made it to her room, locked the door, and only then did she let herself break. The next morning dawned gray and cold. Scarlett dressed with care, not to impress, but to armor herself. A deep green day dress, simple but well made. Her hair pinned up severely. No jewelry except her mother's locket. She looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, composed, controlled, nothing like the screaming girl who'd cried herself to sleep. Good. Let the Duke see what he was buying. A facade, a performance. The real her? He'd never get close enough to find her. She went downstairs at precisely 11 o'clock, when the butler announced the Duke of Blackthorn's arrival. Her father was already in the drawing room, standing by the fireplace with the territorial authority of a man in his own domain. The Duke entered, and Scarlett's first thought was, they lied. They told her he was a monster. The rumors swirled through London like fog. The Duke of Blackthorn, reclusive and cold, who'd let his first wife die in childbirth and hadn't been seen in society since. They said he was cruel, that he'd driven her to death with neglect, that his estate was a tomb and his heart was ice. But the man who walked into her father's drawing room wasn't a monster. He was something worse, beautiful, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of controlled grace that spoke of either military training or a lifetime of rigid self-discipline. Dark hair, darker eyes, a face that could have been carved from marble, all hard lines and sharp angles. He wore black, as if in perpetual mourning, and he looked at her father with the barest hint of acknowledgement before his gaze found Scarlett, and stopped. She felt it like a physical touch, those eyes cataloging her, assessing her, finding her. What? Wanting? Adequate? She couldn't tell. His expression gave away nothing. "Lord Hayes." His voice was deep, controlled. "Thank you for receiving me." "Your Grace." Her father's tone was just slightly too obsequious for Scarlett's taste. "May I present my daughter, Miss Scarlett Hayes?" The Duke turned his full attention to her, and Scarlett forced herself not to look away. She would not be intimidated. She would not— "Miss Hayes." He bowed, perfectly correct. "I'm honored to make your acquaintance." Liar, she thought. But she curtsied anyway, years of training moving her body through the motions while her mind raced. "Your Grace." "Please, sit." Edmund gestured to the sofa. "I'll have tea brought in." "That won't be necessary." The Duke's words were polite but absolute. "I'd like to speak with Miss Hayes privately, if I may." Edmund hesitated, actually hesitated, and Scarlett felt a small, vicious satisfaction that even her powerful father wasn't quite sure how to handle this man. "That's somewhat irregular. I'm aware of the conventions, Lord Hayes. However, since Miss Hayes and I are to be married, I believe a private conversation is warranted." The Duke's tone didn't change, but something in it made it clear this wasn't a request. Her father looked at Scarlett, and she saw the warning in his eyes. "Behave." "Of course, Your Grace." Edmund moved toward the door. "I'll be in my study should you need anything." Then they were alone. The silence stretched out, taut as a wire. Scarlett remained standing, refusing to sit first, refusing to give ground. The Duke regarded her with that same unreadable expression. "You don't want this marriage." Not a question. Scarlett blinked, surprised by the directness. "No." "Neither do I." That stopped her. "Then why— duty, responsibility, the same reasons you're here, I imagine." He moved to the window, looked out at the rain-soaked garden. "I need an heir. You need a husband. It's a transaction, nothing more." The coldness of it was almost refreshing after her father's pretense of caring about her future. How romantic. I'm not offering romance, Miss Hayes. I'm offering security, wealth, a title, freedom from your father's authority. He turned back to her. In exchange, I expect you to manage my household, appear at necessary social functions, and eventually provide an heir. Beyond that, I don't care what you do. You don't care. She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. How generous. It's more than most women in your position receive. My position, Scarlett laughed, sharp and humorless. You mean trapped, sold, bartered like livestock. Something flickered in his expression, there and gone so fast she almost missed it. Yes? The honesty of it was jarring. She'd expected him to dress it up, to pretend this was anything other than what it was, but he just stood there, unflinching, and named it for exactly what it was. I won't love you, she said, testing him. I don't require your love. I require your compliance. And if I refuse to comply, then you'll do so as my wife, in my home, with my name. His voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. Your father was right about one thing, Miss Hayes. You have no other options. So you can fight this marriage if it makes you feel better. You can rage and rebel and make both our lives miserable. Or you can accept the reality and make the best of a situation neither of us chose. She wanted to hate him. It would be so much easier if she could hate him. But standing there in her father's drawing room, watching this cold, controlled man offer her nothing but brutal honesty, she realized something terrifying. He wasn't her enemy. He was just another prisoner in the same cage. When? Her voice came out rougher than she intended. 3 weeks. The contracts are signed. The arrangements made. He paused. I'll send a carriage for you the day before the wedding. You'll stay at Blackthorn Hall until the ceremony. To make sure I don't run. To give you time to adjust. I'll never adjust to being owned. For the first time, something almost like emotion crossed his face. Then we have that in common, at least. He left without another word, without waiting for her father to return, without any of the polite rituals that should have closed the meeting. Just walked out, leaving Scarlett standing alone in the drawing room, trembling with an emotion she couldn't name. Not fear, not quite anger. Something worse. Recognition. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparations Scarlett had no interest in, and decisions made without her input. Her aunt arrived to help with the trousseau, chattering endlessly about silk and lace, while Scarlett stared out windows and counted the days of her freedom like a prisoner marking off a sentence. Her brother Robert came home on leave, took one look at her face, and got drunk enough to say what he really thought. He's a cold bastard, Letty. Everyone knows it. They were in the library, late at night, sharing a bottle of their father's expensive whiskey. Scarlett had never particularly liked her brother. He was too much like Edmund, too comfortable with the world as it was, but tonight she appreciated his company. What do you know about him? She asked. Robert shrugged, already on his third glass. Not much, keeps to himself. Runs his estate like a military operation, from what I hear. Hasn't been to London in years, not since his wife died. How did she die? Childbirth, bad business. He looked uncomfortable. They say he wasn't even there. Was in London on business when it happened. By the time he got back, it was too late. Scarlett absorbed this, trying to square it with the man she'd met. Cold, yes. Controlled. But cruel? She wasn't sure. They say he loved her, Robert continued. First wife, childhood sweetheart, all that rot. When she died, something in him just shut off. And now he wants another wife. Needs an heir, can't do that without a duchess. Robert reached for the bottle again. Look, Letty, I know this isn't what you wanted, but maybe it won't be so bad? He's rich, he's titled, and if he leaves you alone like they say he does, you could have a decent life. Better than ending up some old man's second wife or teaching piano to brats in Bath. You sound like Father. Father's not wrong about everything. Robert's voice was slurring now. You're not a child anymore. You can't just do whatever you want and expect no consequences. Scarlett stood up, suddenly furious. Get out. Letty, I said get out. Go back to your regiment and your gambling and your whores and leave me the hell alone. He went, stumbling and muttering, and Scarlett was alone again. She didn't cry. She was done crying. Instead, she went to her mother's old writing desk and pulled out a piece of paper. Started writing. Dear whoever finds this. No, that was stupid. She crumpled it up, started again. I, Scarlett Louise Hayes, being of sound mind and body, do hereby record my objection to this marriage. I am being coerced against my will. I do not consent. I will never consent. If something happens to me... She stopped. If something happened to her, who would care? Who would even read this? She burned the paper in the candle flame and watched it curl into ash. The day before the wedding, the Blackthorn carriage arrived precisely at noon. Scarlett was ready, not because she wanted to be, but because she refused to give her father the satisfaction of dragging her out. Her trunks were packed, her goodbyes said, or not said in most cases. She wore traveling clothes in deep burgundy, her mother's locket at her throat like a talisman. Her father stood in the entrance hall, formal and distant. "Remember your duty," he said. "Go to hell," she replied, and walked out. The carriage was black, expensive, intimidating. A footman helped her in, and she settled against the plush seats as they pulled away from the only home she'd ever known. She didn't look back. What was the point? The journey to Blackthorn Hall took 6 hours, the landscape gradually shifting from London's sprawl to rolling countryside to something wilder, more remote. As they climbed into the hills, the sky darkened, clouds gathering with the promise of another storm. Perfect. Pathetic fallacy at its finest. When the carriage finally turned through massive iron gates and up a long, tree-lined drive, Scarlett got her first glimpse of her new prison. Blackthorn Hall wasn't a house. It was a monument, all stone and towers and Gothic architecture that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Gargoyles perched on the corners. Windows glinted like eyes. It should have been ridiculous, a parody of itself. Instead, it was magnificent and absolutely terrifying. The carriage stopped at the front entrance. The door opened. Scarlett stepped out into the cold wind and looked up at the massive oak doors. A woman waited there. 50s, gray hair pulled back severely, wearing black like everyone else in this cursed place seemed to. Her face was stern, but not unkind. "Miss Hayes, I'm Mrs. Thornberry, the housekeeper. Welcome to Blackthorn Hall." Welcome. As if Scarlett had a choice in being here. "Thank you," she managed, because what else could she say? "His Grace is unavailable at the moment, estate business, but he asked me to show you to your rooms and ensure you have everything you need." Of course he was unavailable. Couldn't even be bothered to greet his future wife. Scarlett followed Mrs. Thornberry inside, through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past rooms dark with heavy furniture and darker memories. Portraits lined the walls, generations of blackthorns, all looking vaguely disapproving. "These will be your chambers," Mrs. Thornberry said, opening a door to reveal a suite of rooms that were, Scarlett had to admit, beautiful. High ceilings, massive windows overlooking the grounds, a 4-poster bed that could sleep 5. Everything in shades of cream and gold, surprisingly light after the gloom of the corridors. "The Duchess's chambers," Mrs. Thornberry added quietly. "His Grace had them redecorated for you." Scarlett walked to the window. From here, she could see the gardens stretching down to a lake, woods beyond. Beautiful, isolated, perfect for a prison. "Dinner is at 8. His Grace will join you then." Mrs. Thornberry moved toward the door. "If you need anything, ring the bell. A maid will come." Then she was gone, and Scarlett was alone in her golden cage. She stood at the window for a long time, watching the storm clouds gather, feeling the first drops of rain against the glass. Tomorrow she would marry a stranger. Tomorrow her life as Scarlett Hayes would end and something else would begin. But tonight she was still herself. She unpacked her trunks herself, not wanting servants' hands on her things. Hung up the wedding dress her aunt had insisted on, white silk, beautiful, meaningless. Then she changed into a simple dinner dress and waited. 8 o'clock came. A maid appeared to escort her down. The dining room was exactly what she'd expected. Massive, formal, one long table set for 2. The Duke was already there, standing by the fireplace, still wearing black. He turned when she entered. "Miss Hayes?" "Your Grace." They sat at opposite ends of the table, an acre of polished wood between them. Servants appeared with soup, wine, the first course of what would probably be a 7-course meal. Scarlett picked up her spoon, put it down again. "This is absurd." The Duke looked up. "I beg your pardon?" "This." She gestured at the table, the distance, the formal ridiculousness of it all. "We're the only 2 people here. We're getting married tomorrow, and we're sitting 20 feet apart like strangers at a state dinner." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe? "What would you suggest?" "That we sit close enough to have an actual conversation, if we're going to pretend to be civil." For a long moment he didn't move. Then he stood, picked up his plate and wine glass, and walked down to her end of the table, sat in the chair to her right. Better? It was, and it wasn't. Up close, he was even more intimidating, tall enough that she had to look up, broad enough that he seemed to take up all the space. But at least now she could see his face, read whatever small emotions might cross it. "Thank you," she said. They ate in silence for a while. Scarlett tried the soup, excellent, of course, and watched him from the corner of her eye. His movements were precise, controlled. Everything about him was controlled. "Why haven't you remarried before now?" The question came out before she could stop it. He didn't look up from his plate. "I had no reason to. Until now." "Until now. What changed?" "I'm 34 years old. The estate needs an heir. It's time." His voice was flat, reciting facts. "You're wondering if I loved her? Your first wife?" "Yes." Scarlett waited, but he didn't elaborate. "And did you?" "That's not your concern." "I'm marrying you tomorrow. I think it's my concern." He set down his fork, finally looked at her directly. "I married Catherine when I was 22. She was 19. We'd known each other since childhood. She was kind, gentle, everything a duchess should be, Sham. Was. Past tense. Dead. She died 7 years ago. Childbirth complications. I was in London." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "By the time I received word and returned, it was too late. She was gone. The child as well." The pain in his voice was so carefully controlled it almost disappeared. Almost. "I'm sorry," Scarlett said, and meant it. "Don't be. It was a long time ago. And yet you wear black every day." I wear black because it's practical." But something in his tone said otherwise. They ate in silence again, but it was different now, slightly less hostile. Scarlett found herself studying him, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the scar she could just see at his temple. "What happened there?" She gestured at the scar. "Riding accident when I was 15. Tried to jump a fence I had no business jumping." The barest hint of something that might have been humor touched his voice. "My father was furious." "Was he cruel?" "He was exacting. There's a difference." "Is there?" The Duke, Adrian, she supposed she should start thinking of him as, looked at her with something approaching interest. "You think I'll be cruel to you. I think you'll try to control me. I think you're ungovernable." "Damn right I am." That startled a sound out of him. Not quite a laugh, but close. "Your father warned me you had a sharp tongue." "My father can go—" She stopped herself, barely. "My father doesn't know anything about me." "Neither do I." Adrian picked up his wine glass. "Perhaps we should remedy that." "Why? You said this was a transaction." "It is, but even transactions work better when both parties understand the terms." "Fair enough." Scarlett leaned back in her chair. "What do you want to know?" "What did you want to do before all this?" He gestured vaguely at the room, the situation, the marriage neither of them wanted. No one had ever asked her that. Not once. "I wanted—" The word stuck. "I wanted to travel. To see things. Rome, Paris, Constantinople. I wanted to ride horses too fast and read books in languages I had to teach myself. I wanted to make my own choices and live my own life and not be some man's property. That's not a small ambition. No, but it's mine." She met his eyes. "And now it's gone, because my father decided his political alliance was more important than my freedom." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "I can't give you freedom, Miss Hayes, but I can give you autonomy. Run the household as you see fit. Manage the estate. You'll find I'm gone off and on business. Make what choices you can within the constraints we both live under." It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was more than her father had offered. "And what do you want from me? Beyond the air and the social appearances? Honestly?" He looked tired suddenly, the control slipping just enough for her to see the man underneath. "I want to be left alone. I want to do my duty to this estate and this title without having to pretend to be something I'm not. I want—" He stopped. "What?" "Nothing. It doesn't matter." But Scarlett heard what he hadn't said. "I want to stop hurting." They finished the meal in silence, but it was comfortable now. When the dessert was cleared and the servants dismissed, Adrian stood. "The ceremony is at 2 o'clock tomorrow in the chapel here on the grounds. Small, just the necessary witnesses. No grand society wedding. Neither of us wants that circus." "True enough." "Good night, Miss Hayes." "Good night, Your Grace." He paused at the door. "You can call me Adrian. After tomorrow, you'll be my wife. We should probably dispense with the formalities." "Scarlett," she replied, "if we're being honest with each other." He nodded and left. Scarlett sat alone in the dining room, listening to the storm pick up outside, feeling the walls of her cage settle around her. But maybe, just maybe, there were worse cages to be trapped in. And maybe, if she was very clever and very brave, she could find a way to turn this prison into something else. Not freedom, not yet, but a beginning. Scarlett woke to gray light filtering through unfamiliar curtains, and the immediate crushing knowledge that today was the day she stopped being herself. She lay still for a moment, staring at the canopy above her bed. Cream silk, probably cost more than most people earned in a year, and tried to find some courage in the hollow space where her heart should be. The rain had stopped sometime in the night, but the sky looked heavy, threatening to start again at any moment. A soft knock at the door. A maid entered without waiting for an answer, carrying a breakfast tray. "Good morning, miss. Mrs. Thornberry said you'd need an early start. The seamstress will be here in an hour to make final adjustments to your dress." Scarlett sat up. The girl couldn't have been more than 16. Nervous hands wouldn't meet her eyes. "What's your name?" "Mary, miss." "How long have you worked here, Mary?" 3 years, miss." Still wouldn't look at her. "And the Duke? What's he like to work for?" Mary's hands tightened on the tray. "He's fair, miss. Exacting, but fair. Long as you do your work proper and don't cause trouble, he leaves you be. And if you do cause trouble—" Now the girl did look up, and Scarlett saw something like pity in her young face. "Then you leave, one way or another." She set the tray down and hurried out, and Scarlett was alone again with weak tea and toast she had no appetite for. The morning passed in a blur of preparations she felt completely detached from. The seamstress pinned and tucked. Her aunt arrived from London, clucking over her pale face and telling her to smile. Mrs. Thornberry supervised everything with military precision, and through it all, Scarlett stood like a doll being dressed, saying nothing, feeling nothing. Until the moment came to put on the wedding dress. It was beautiful. She could admit that objectively. White silk that caught the light, seed pearls sewn in patterns that probably had some symbolic meaning she didn't care about. It fit perfectly because of course it did. Everything about this day was perfect except the one thing that mattered, her consent. Her aunt fussed with the veil. "You look lovely, dear, truly. The Duke is a very fortunate man." Scarlett looked at herself in the mirror. She looked like a bride. She felt like a sacrifice. "I need a moment," she said, "alone." "But we need to—" "I said I need a moment." Her voice came out sharper than intended, and her aunt actually stepped back. "Of course. We'll be just outside." They filed out. The seamstress, the maids, her interfering aunt, and Scarlett was finally, blessedly alone. She walked to the window, looked out at the grounds. From here she could see the chapel, small and stone and ancient. In less than an hour, she'd walk down that aisle and speak vows she didn't mean to a man she didn't love. She could run, right now, out the servants' entrance through the woods to the village beyond. She could— What? She had no money, no friends, no prospects. Her father would find her within a day and drag her back. And then things would be worse, so much worse. At least Adrian had been honest with her. At least he wasn't pretending this was anything other than what it was. A knock at the door. "Miss, it's time." Time. What a funny word. As if this moment had been approaching forever, inevitable as death. She took one last look at herself in the mirror. "Goodbye, Scarlett Hayes," she whispered. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you." Then she opened the door and walked toward her execution chapel. The chapel was everything Adrian had promised. Small, private, just the necessary witnesses. A minister she'd never met, Mrs. Thornberry and the head groundskeeper standing as witnesses. No music, no flowers, no celebration, just cold stone and colder duty. Adrian stood at the altar in black, of course black, and watched her approach with that same unreadable expression. Scarlett forced herself to walk steadily, head high, refusing to cry or stumble or show any weakness. When she reached him, he held out his hand. She took it. His palm was warm, slightly calloused. Strong. The minister began speaking, words about duty and honor and cleaving together. Scarlett barely heard them. She was too focused on breathing, on staying upright, on not screaming. "Do you, Adrian Edward Blackthorne, take this woman?" "I do." His voice was steady, certain, as if this meant nothing to him at all. "And do you, Scarlett Louise Hayes, take this man?" The pause stretched. She felt Adrian's hand tighten slightly on hers, felt everyone watching, waiting. She could say no. Right now. She could refuse and damn the consequences. But what would that accomplish except more pain? "I do." The words tasted like ashes. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Just like that. 2 minutes and it was done. She was the Duchess of Blackthorne. She was his. "You may kiss the bride." Adrian leaned down, not far, she was tall, and pressed his lips to hers. It was brief, formal, completely devoid of feeling. When he pulled back, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Not regret exactly, but not satisfaction either. They signed the register. The witnesses congratulated them with careful smiles. And then it was over. "There's a wedding breakfast prepared," Mrs. Thornberry said. "Just something small." "That won't be necessary." Adrian's voice cut through the polite chatter. "I have business to attend to. My wife can settle in as she sees fit." "My wife?" The word sounded foreign in his mouth. "You're leaving?" Scarlett heard herself ask. "Now?" "I told you I'm often away on business. The estate doesn't run itself." He was already moving toward the door. "Mrs. Thornberry will show you around. Make yourself at home." Then he was gone, striding away from his own wedding like it was just another task to check off a list. Scarlett stood in the empty chapel, still wearing her wedding dress, married and abandoned in the span of 15 minutes. Her aunt looked mortified. "I'm sure he'll be back soon, dear. Men have their responsibilities." "Get out." Scarlett's voice was very quiet. "All of you, get out." They left. Even Mrs. Thornberry, who gave her one long, assessing look before ushering everyone away. Scarlett sank onto the front pew and finally let herself feel it. Rage. Not sadness, not grief. Pure, incandescent fury. She'd done everything right, showed up, wore the dress, spoke the vows, and he couldn't even be bothered to stay for the wedding breakfast. Couldn't give her even that small courtesy. Fine. If this was how he wanted to play it, she could play too. She stood, gathering her skirts, and marched back to the main house. Found Mrs. Thornberry in her office. "I want a complete tour of the estate. Every room, every building, every inch of land, starting now." The housekeeper looked up, surprised. "Your Grace, perhaps you'd like to rest?" "I'd like to see my new prison. All of it." Mrs. Thornberry studied her for a long moment. Then something like respect crossed her face. "Very well. We'll start with the main house." They walked for hours. Through endless corridors and countless rooms, drawing rooms and music rooms and libraries full of books no one read. The kitchens where the staff stopped working to stare at her. The cellars where wine older than her father gathered dust. Every space was immaculate, perfectly maintained and completely lifeless. "How many staff?" Scarlett asked. 43 in total, 20 in the main house, 15 in the grounds and stables, 8 in the home farm. "And they all answer to you?" "To me, and to Mr. Graves, the estate steward, though his grace makes all final decisions." Of course he did. control freak. What about the previous Duchess, Catherine? What was she like? Mrs. Thornberry's expression went carefully neutral. She was very kind, very gentle. The staff loved her. Everything I'm not, Scarlett heard in the silence. Show me her rooms. Your Grace, I don't think... Show me. They were in the east wing, overlooking the rose garden. Dust sheets covered the furniture, but otherwise everything was exactly as it had been 7 years ago. Scarlett walked through the space, seeing the life that had been lived here. A half-finished embroidery still in its frame, books on the nightstand, a music box on the dresser. He never cleared it out, she said. No, Your Grace. He gave orders that nothing was to be touched. A shrine to a dead woman. Perfect. Scarlett picked up the music box, opened it. A tinkling melody filled the room, something sweet and sad. She closed it with a snap. I want these rooms cleared, everything boxed and stored. Mrs. Thornberry looked shocked. But His Grace said, His Grace married me today and then left. I don't particularly care what he said. Scarlett met her eyes. I'm the Duchess now. This is my house, and I won't live in a dead woman's shadow. Clear the rooms. For a moment she thought the housekeeper would refuse. Then Mrs. Thornberry nodded slowly. Yes, Your Grace, I'll see it done. They continued the tour. The grounds were extensive. Formal gardens, a lake, woods that stretched for miles, a home farm that supplied most of the estate's needs, tenant cottages that looked well maintained. Whatever else Adrian was, he took care of his people. But everywhere Scarlett looked, she saw the same thing. Control. Order. Everything in its place, everything exactly as it should be. Nothing spontaneous, nothing alive. It would drive her mad within a month. What about horses? She asked. I saw stables. Yes, Your Grace. His Grace keeps several hunters. You're welcome to ride, of course. Finally. Something that might not be completely terrible. The stables were at least warm, full of the familiar smell of hay and horse. A dozen stalls, most occupied. Scarlett walked down the line, letting the animals sniff her hand, until she came to the last stall. The mare inside was beautiful, dapple gray, restless, tossing her head. A note on the stall door said, Dangerous, do not approach. What's her story? Scarlett asked the stable master, a grizzled man who'd introduced himself as John. Storm, Your Grace, through His Grace last month. He wanted her sold, but I haven't found a buyer yet. Too wild. Scarlett looked at the mare, saw the intelligence in her eyes, the fury. She's not wild. She's scared. She's dangerous is what she is. Nearly killed a groom last week. Because she's being treated like a problem instead of a horse. Scarlett opened the stall door. Your Grace, I wouldn't... But she was already inside. The mare backed up, ears flat, showing the whites of her eyes. Scarlett stood very still, hand out, not approaching. Easy, girl. I know. Everyone's trying to break you, and you're not going to let them. Good. Don't let them. She kept talking, soft and low, until finally the mare's ears came forward. Curious. Scarlett took one slow step forward. Another. The mare didn't bolt. When she finally touched that velvet nose, she felt a small victory. I'll be riding her, she told John. Tomorrow morning. Have her saddled at dawn. Your Grace, that horse is not safe. Neither am I. She walked out of the stall, closing the door carefully. Dawn. Don't be late. Adrian didn't return for dinner. Or for the night, apparently, because when Scarlett woke the next morning in her vast, lonely bed, there'd been no sound from the adjoining suite where his rooms were. Fine. She didn't need him anyway. She dressed in her riding habit, dark blue, practical, and made her way to the stables as the sun rose. John was there, looking deeply unhappy, with Storm already saddled. The mare was dancing, tossing her head, fighting the bit. Last chance to reconsider, Your Grace. Not a chance. Scarlett took the reins, put her foot in the stirrup, and swung up before she could think better of it. Storm exploded. She reared, twisted, tried to scrape Scarlett off against the stable wall, but Scarlett had learned to ride on her grandfather's half-wild hunters, and she knew how to stay on a difficult horse. She kept her seat, kept her hands light on the reins, and let the mare burn off the first fury. When Storm finally settled enough to stand still, sides heaving, Scarlett leaned forward and patted her neck. Good girl. Now let's see what you can really do. She pressed her heels in, and the mare shot forward like she'd been fired from a cannon. They flew across the grounds, over the formal gardens, and down toward the lake. Scarlett let Storm run, let her stretch out and remember what it felt like to move freely. The wind tore at her hair, pulled pins free, whipped the carefully arranged curls into tangles. She didn't care. For the first time since she'd received her father's summons, she felt something other than trapped. They rode for over an hour, covering miles of the estate. When Scarlett finally turned back toward the stables, both she and the mare were exhausted, exhilarated, and covered in mud. John stood in the stable yard, looking like he'd aged 10 years.
Jesus Christ, Your Grace, I thought you were dead for sure. Not dead, just needed to breathe. Scarlett dismounted, her legs shaking from the effort of controlling the mare. Storm and I have an understanding now, don't we, girl? The mare butted her shoulder, almost gentle. She'll need a proper cooling down, a good brushing, extra oats, Scarlett said, handing over the reins. And tomorrow morning, same time. His Grace is going to have my head for this. His Grace isn't here. I am.
Same time, John. She walked back to the house, muddy and windblown and more herself than she'd felt in weeks. Let Adrian come home to that. Let him see that she wasn't going to be the quiet, biddable duchess he probably expected. Mrs. Thornberry met her at the door, took one look at her state, and sighed. Your bath is being prepared, Your Grace, and you have a visitor, Lady Thornfield. She's waiting in the drawing room. Scarlett's brief good mood evaporated. Margaret Thornfield was her closest neighbor, a widow in her 60s who apparently considered it her duty to know everyone's business. Perfect. Tell her I'll be down in an hour. I already offered tea. She's quite settled in. Of course she was. Scarlett changed quickly, let a maid attempt to fix her hair, and went down to face her first test as Duchess. Lady Thornfield was exactly as Scarlett remembered from the few times they'd met in London. Sharp-eyed, sharper-tongued, dressed expensively in black silk. She looked up when Scarlett entered, and her expression was pure calculation. Your Grace, how lovely! I came as soon as I heard about the wedding. How kind. Scarlett sat, accepting a cup of tea she didn't want. I'm afraid my husband is away on business. Yes, I heard. How unfortunate to be abandoned so quickly. The words dripped false sympathy. But then, the Duke has always been rather particular about his duties. He's a responsible landowner. Oh, is that what we're calling it? Lady Thornfield smiled. My dear girl, everyone knows why Adrian Blackthorne married you. He needs an heir, and after what happened to poor Catherine, he's quite determined to get one quickly. The casual cruelty was breathtaking. Scarlett set down her teacup carefully. I'm sorry, are you always this rude, or is this a special performance for new neighbors? Lady Thornfield blinked, genuinely surprised. I beg your pardon? My marriage is none of your concern, neither is my husband's history. So unless you have actual business here, I'd appreciate it if you'd finish your tea and leave. Well, I can see why your father was so eager to be rid of you. That tongue of yours is my own, and I'll use it as I please. Scarlett stood. Thank you for visiting, Lady Thornfield. I won't keep you any longer. The older woman rose, visibly affronted. You'll find, my dear, that things are done differently in the country. We have standards here, expectations, and the Duchess of Blackthorne has always... The Duchess of Blackthorne is standing right in front of you, and she's telling you to leave. For a moment, she thought Lady Thornfield would argue. Then the woman swept toward the door, every inch the offended aristocrat. You'll regret this rudeness, she said. I know everyone who matters in this county. You'll find yourself very isolated if you make an enemy of me. I'll take my chances. When she was gone, Scarlett sat back down, hands shaking slightly. Mrs. Thornberry appeared in the doorway. That was decisive, the housekeeper said carefully. She was insufferable. She's also the most influential woman in the county. Every hostess takes their cues from her. If she decides you're not acceptable, then I won't be invited to boring dinner parties. Somehow I'll survive. Scarlett stood. I have more important things to worry about than social standing, like figuring out how to live in this enormous house with a husband who couldn't even be bothered to come home to his own wife. Adrian returned 3 days later. Scarlett was in the library, the one room in this mausoleum she actually liked, reading by the fire when she heard his footsteps in the hallway. She didn't look up when he entered. You're home.
Her voice was flat. I am. He moved to the desk, started sorting through papers. I trust you've settled in. Oh yes, it's been delightful. I've offended our most important neighbor, scandalized the staff by riding your dangerous horse, and had Catherine's rooms cleared out. Quite the productive few days. That got his attention. He turned, expression thunderous. You did what? I had Catherine's rooms packed up and stored. They were gathering dust and making everyone uncomfortable. I gave explicit orders that nothing in those rooms was to be touched. And I'm your wife, not your servant. I gave different orders. Scarlett closed her book, finally looking at him directly. You can't keep a shrine to a dead woman and expect me to live here comfortably. Choose one or the other, Adrian. His jaw tightened. You had no right. I had every right. This is my house now, too. Or did you forget that part when you were signing the marriage contracts? They stared at each other across the library, the tension thick enough to choke on. Scarlett saw the moment he decided not to fight this battle, saw him force the anger down, lock it away behind that controlled expression. Fine. The rooms are cleared. What's done is done. He turned back to his papers. As for Storm, John tells me you've been riding her daily, alone. Is that a problem? It's dangerous. That mare nearly killed a man. That mare was being handled by idiots who thought breaking her spirit was the same as training her. I know the difference. But clearly, you think you know everything. And you think you can control everything. How's that working out for you? The words hung in the air, sharp as knives. Adrian's hand stilled on the papers. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet. I don't want to fight with you, Scarlett. Then stop trying to dictate my every move. Stop leaving without a word and coming back like I'm just another piece of furniture. Stop! She stopped herself, furious at the emotion leaking into her voice. Just stop treating me like I don't exist except when it's convenient for you. He was silent for a long moment. Then, you're right. I've been unfair. The admission surprised her. What? I married you, made you my wife, and then immediately left you alone in a strange house with no support. That was wrong. He finally looked at her, and she saw something almost like regret in his eyes. I'm not good at this, at being around people. I've spent 7 years alone by choice, and I've forgotten how to... He gestured vaguely. How to share space, how to consider someone else. Then maybe you shouldn't have gotten married. I didn't have a choice either, remember? But his voice was gentler now. Look, I know this isn't what either of us wanted, but we're bound together now, so perhaps we should try to make the best of it. And how do you suggest we do that? Honestly, I don't know. He moved to the chair across from hers, sat down heavily. But I'm willing to try if you are. Scarlett studied him. He looked tired, she realized, worn down by something more than just travel. There were shadows under his eyes, tension in his shoulders. Where did you go? She asked. These past 3 days. London. Business with my solicitors. Some tenants had disputes that needed resolving. The usual estate management. He paused. I also visited your father. Her stomach dropped. Why? To make it clear that any future contact with you would go through me first. That he no longer has any authority over you. Adrian's expression was grim. He wasn't pleased. You stood up to my father? For me? You're my wife. Your welfare is my responsibility now. He said it matter-of-factly, as if it was obvious. He won't bother you again. I made certain of that. Something shifted in Scarlett's chest, a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around herself. Thank you. Don't thank me. It's the least I could do. They sat in silence for a while. Not hostile now, but not exactly comfortable either. Finally, Adrian stood. I should let you get back to your reading. I have work to catch up on. Adrian? He stopped at the door. The writing. Storm and we need each other. Please don't ask me to stop. He looked back at her, and something in his expression softened. I won't. Just be careful. I don't want to lose another... He stopped himself. Another wife. The words he didn't say echoed in the silence. I'll be careful, Scarlett promised. He nodded and left. Scarlett sat by the fire for a long time after, thinking about reluctant husbands and dangerous horses and the strange, fragile truce they'd just negotiated. Maybe this marriage wouldn't be a complete disaster after all.
She should have known better than to hope. A week later, the estate manager, Mr. Graves, a thin man who clearly resented taking orders from a woman, came to her with a problem. Several tenant families were behind on rent, struggling after a bad harvest. He wanted to evict them immediately. "Absolutely not," Scarlett said. They were in the estate office, account books spread between them. "We'll work out payment plans. His Grace has always insisted on prompt payment." "His Grace isn't here. I am." She pointed to a line in the ledger. "The estate is profitable enough to absorb a few months of delayed rent. These are people, not numbers on a page. With respect, Your Grace, you've been here less than a month. You don't understand how things are done. I understand that throwing families into the street in winter is cruel and unnecessary." She closed the ledger. "No evictions. Set up meetings with each family. We'll find solutions." The Graves looked like he'd swallowed something sour, but he nodded. "As you wish, Your Grace." Word spread quickly. Within days, the tenants were looking at her differently, less like the unwelcome intruder, more like someone who might actually care about their welfare. Scarlett started visiting the cottages, seeing the conditions for herself, making notes about repairs needed, and running headfirst into resistance. The local gentry, led by Lady Thornfield, made it clear she was not welcome in their circles. Invitations didn't come. When she attended church, the whispers followed. The new Duchess. Wild, ungovernable, nothing like Sweet Catherine. Scarlett told herself she didn't care, but it wore on her, that constant disapproval, that sense of being watched and found wanting. And Adrian was gone more than he was home. Business, always business. Estate matters that took him to London, to the northern properties, anywhere but here. When he was at Blackthorn Hall, they circled each other carefully, polite, distant, two strangers sharing a house. At night, alone in her vast bed, Scarlett sometimes heard him moving in his rooms next door. But he never came to her, never crossed that threshold. She told herself she was grateful. This was what she wanted: autonomy, independence, freedom within her cage. But late at night, listening to the silence of a man who wouldn't even try to touch her, she felt something uncomfortably close to loneliness. The breaking point came on a gray November morning. Scarlett was in the stables, brushing down Storm after their morning ride, when raised voices caught her attention. She walked to the stable yard and found Adrian arguing with John and Mr. Graves. "Completely irresponsible," Graves was saying. "The tenants are getting ideas, Your Grace. They think because the Duchess showed them kindness, they can negotiate everything." "What's going on?" Scarlett demanded. Adrian turned and she saw the anger in his eyes. "You countermanded my direct orders. The Millers were supposed to be evicted last week. They have 6 children and nowhere to go. I arranged a payment plan. You had no authority to do that." "I'm the Duchess. I have every authority. Over the household, yes, not the estate business." His voice was ice. "I run this estate my way. I've been doing it successfully for over a decade. I don't need you undermining my decisions." Every word was a slap. Scarlett felt her own anger rising to match his. Your way is treating people like they're disposable. That family has been on this land for 3 generations, and they're behind on rent. Rules exist for a reason. So do mercy and compassion. This isn't a charity, Scarlett. It's a business. It's people's lives." They were shouting now, years of frustration and resentment pouring out. The staff had disappeared, smart enough to sense danger. Only Graves remained, watching with barely concealed satisfaction. "You want to help?" Adrian's voice was cutting. "Then do your job. Manage the house. Plan menus, arrange flowers. Leave the actual work to people who understand it." The dismissal was brutal. Scarlett felt something inside her crack. "You're right," she said quietly. "I don't understand. I don't understand how someone who claims to care about his people can be so cold. I don't understand how you can live in this house like a ghost and call it responsibility. And I sure as hell don't understand how you can stand there and tell me my only value is decorating and planning dinner parties." She turned to leave, but his hand caught her arm. "Scarlett, don't." She pulled away, and there must have been something in her face because he actually stepped back. "You want me to stay in my place? Fine. I'll be the perfect Duchess. Silent, obedient, invisible." That's what you really wanted anyway, isn't it? Not a wife. Just another thing you can control. She left him standing in the stable yard and walked straight to the house, to the library, where she proceeded to throw every breakable object she could reach at the fireplace until Mrs. Thornberry appeared. Your Grace, get out. Your Grace, please. I said get out. The housekeeper fled, and Scarlett collapsed into a chair, surrounded by shattered porcelain and her own shattered composure. She'd been fooling herself. Nothing had changed. She was still trapped, still powerless, still nothing more than an ornament in someone else's life. And the worst part? She'd started to hope, started to think that maybe, just maybe, this marriage could become something real. What a joke. She sat there until the fire burned down to embers, until the anger faded into something harder and colder. When she finally stood, her decision was made. If Adrian wanted a silent, decorative duchess, he could have one, but he was going to regret it. Because Scarlett Hayes, no, Scarlett Blackthorn, wasn't going to disappear. She was going to become exactly what this estate needed, with or without her husband's approval. And if that started a war between them, then let it burn. The next morning, Scarlett woke with a plan and a fury cold enough to frost glass. She dressed in one of her plainest gowns, dark gray, practical, nothing that screamed duchess, and went downstairs before dawn. Mrs. Thornberry found her in the estate office, already going through the ledgers. Your Grace, what are you— Getting to work. Scarlett didn't look up. I need a complete list of every tenant family, names, rent obligations, current arrears, household size, and I want to know about every repair request that's been filed in the last year. Mr. Graves handles all of that. Mr. Graves reports to the Duke. I'm asking you. She finally looked up. Unless you'd prefer I remain decorative and useless? Mrs. Thornberry's mouth twitched, almost a smile. I'll have the information by noon, Your Grace. Thank you. When Adrian came down for breakfast 2 hours later, he found Scarlett still in the office, surrounded by papers and making notes. He stopped in the doorway. What are you doing? My job. She kept writing. You wanted me to manage the household. I'm managing it. This isn't household business. These are estate accounts. These affect the household. If tenants can't pay rent, they can't buy goods from our home farm. If they can't buy goods, our farm loses revenue. If our farm loses revenue, we have to purchase supplies elsewhere at higher cost. Everything's connected, Adrian. I'm just following the threads. He stepped into the room. Scarlett, I met with the Miller family yesterday. Did you know their youngest daughter has consumption? That's why they fell behind, medical expenses. But evicting them won't get you your money. It'll just put a sick child on the street. She looked up at him. Is that really what you want? His jaw tightened. You don't understand the complexities, then explain them to me. Sit down and show me why throwing desperate people off land they've worked for generations is good business. I'm listening. For a moment she thought he'd walk out, but instead he pulled out a chair and sat across from her. When I inherited this estate, it was bleeding money. My father was generous to a fault, forgave debts, deferred payments, trusted people to do right by him. His voice was flat, reciting facts. Within 5 years, we were nearly bankrupt. Half the tenants owed years of back rent. The land was falling apart because there was no money for improvements. I had to make hard choices. So you became your father's opposite. I became practical. I set rules and enforced them equally, no exceptions, and it worked. The estate is profitable now, solvent, secure, and empty. Scarlett leaned forward. You've made this place run like a machine, Adrian. Efficient and cold and completely devoid of anything human. Is that really what you want? To be surrounded by people who obey you out of fear instead of respect? Fear keeps things orderly. Fear keeps things brittle. One bad season, one crisis, and everything shatters. She pushed the ledger toward him. Look at this. Really look. We have enough surplus to absorb temporary setbacks. We could help the Millers and still turn a profit. We could repair the Henderson cottage. The roof's been leaking for 2 years, and barely notice the expense. But instead we hoard money like dragons and wonder why no one trusts us. He stared at the numbers she'd circled, calculations she'd made. When did you learn estate management? My grandfather. Before he died, he used to let me help with his accounts. He said a woman should understand money, even if society pretended we couldn't. She met Adrian's eyes. I'm not some empty-headed ornament. I'm capable of more than flower arranging. The question is whether you'll let me prove it." The silence stretched between them, weighted with years of grief and control, and walls built too high to easily climb. Finally, Adrian said, "Show me your plan for the Millers." It wasn't surrender, but it was a crack in the armor. Scarlett showed him. Over the next week, something shifted. Adrian didn't leave for London. Instead, he stayed, working alongside Scarlett as they restructured the tenant agreements. He pushed back on half her suggestions, called her idealistic more than once. But he listened. And slowly, grudgingly, he started to bend. The Millers got their payment plan. The Henderson roof got fixed. 3 other families received extensions on overdue rent in exchange for labor on estate improvements. And the whispers started. At church on Sunday, Scarlett felt the stares like physical touches. She kept her head high, Adrian silent and imposing beside her, but she heard the murmurs. "Changed everything, she has." "Duke's gone soft, letting a woman run things." "Not natural, is it? A duchess involving herself in men's business." After the service, Lady Thornfield cornered her by the carriage. "How proud you must be," the older woman said, voice dripping acid. "Turning the Duke of Blackthorn into your personal lapdog." Scarlett smiled sweetly. "I'm sorry, were you addressing me? I thought you decided I wasn't worth acknowledging. Everyone knows what you're doing, playing at being the benevolent duchess while you bankrupt your husband. Everyone seems to know a great deal about my marriage. Fascinating, since even I don't know half of what goes on in it." Lady Thornfield's expression hardened. "You may think you've won some victory here, girl, but the county won't forget. When your little experiments fail, and they will fail, we'll all be here to remind you that some of us tried to warn you." She swept away before Scarlett could respond. Adrian appeared at her elbow. "Ignore her." Hard to ignore someone who controls every social circle within 50 miles. "Then we won't bother with society. We have work to do." Should have been isolating, being cut off from the local gentry. But instead, Scarlett found herself with different company. The tenants who'd feared her started bringing their problems to her attention. The household staff began asking her opinion instead of immediately deferring to Mr. Graves. Even John the stablemaster warmed up, teaching her about horse breeding and bloodlines. For the first time since her forced marriage, Scarlett felt like she was building something real. Then the storm came. It started with rain, the kind that fell in sheets, turning roads to rivers and fields to lakes. 3 days of relentless downpour that flooded the lower pastures and set everyone on edge. On the 4th day, one of the tenant farmers came pounding on the door at dawn. "Your Grace, the river's rising fast. The bridge to the South Fields is about to go. If it does, 6 families will be cut off, and the Harrisons' cottage is right in the flood path." Scarlett was already moving, calling for her riding clothes. "How long do we have?" "Hour, maybe less." Adrian appeared on the stairs, already dressed. "I'll take the men to the bridge, see if we can reinforce it." "The Harrisons need to evacuate," Scarlett said. "Mrs. Harrison is 8 months pregnant. She can't walk through floodwater. The main house can take them in. Mrs. Thornberry is busy preparing. I'll go get them." She was pulling on her boots, ignoring his sharp look. "Scarlett, it's too dangerous. We don't have time to argue. You handle the bridge. I'll get the Harrisons. We'll meet back here." She was out the door before he could object further, Storm already saddled and waiting. The mare danced nervously as rain lashed down, but Scarlett swung up and pointed her toward the south road. The ride was a nightmare. The road was barely visible under inches of running water. Twice Storm stumbled, nearly throwing her. Scarlett kept her seat through sheer stubbornness and talked the mare through it. "Come on, girl. We've got people counting on us. You can do this." The Harrison cottage appeared through the rain, small, shabby, water already lapping at the doorstep. Scarlett dismounted and pounded on the door. Mrs. Harrison opened it, face pale with fear. "Your Grace, you shouldn't be here. Pack essentials. You're coming to the hall. Now." "But my husband's at the bridge with the other men, and I can't leave until—" "Mrs. Harrison, that water is rising by the minute. Your baby needs you alive. Pack. Now." The woman moved, thank heaven, gathering her 2 young children and shoving belongings into a bag with shaking hands. Scarlett helped load the children onto Storm, both of them, small and terrified, and took the reins. "Can you walk?" she asked Mrs. Harrison. "I can manage."
They started back.
It was slower going with the children, with the pregnant woman struggling through water that was now ankle-deep on the road. Halfway back, Mrs. Harrison stumbled, cried out. "The baby," she gasped. "Something's wrong." Scarlett made a decision. "Hold on, just hold on." She left Storm with Mrs. Harrison, took the youngest child, couldn't have been more than 4, and started running. The water was knee-deep in places now, trying to sweep her feet out from under her. But she'd grown up swimming in her grandfather's lake, and she knew how to move through current. The hall appeared like salvation. She burst through the front doors, soaking wet and gasping. "Mrs. Thornberry, get the doctor. Mrs. Harrison's in labor, and she's still half a mile out on the south road. I need men with a cart. Now!" The household exploded into action. Within minutes, a cart was racing back down the road with 3 stable hands and the local doctor. Scarlett tried to follow, but Mrs. Thornberry physically held her back. "You've done your part, Your Grace. You'll catch your death if you go back out in this." "But, Mrs. Harrison, we'll be fine because you got help. Now come, you need dry clothes before you collapse." Scarlett let herself be led upstairs, stripped of soaking garments, wrapped in blankets. But she couldn't rest. She stood at the window, watching the rain, waiting. An hour later, the cart returned. They'd gotten to Mrs. Harrison in time, got her to the cottage of a neighbor on higher ground. The baby wasn't coming yet, false labor brought on by stress. But she needed to stay off her feet. And the bridge? The messenger who arrived 20 minutes later delivered the news. It had held, barely. Adrian and 15 men had worked in the driving rain to reinforce it with timber and sandbags, and it was standing. The south fields were accessible. No one was stranded. When Adrian finally came home, he was covered in mud and exhausted. He found Scarlett in the library, wrapped in blankets, drinking tea she couldn't taste. He stopped in the doorway, just looked at her. "You rode out in that storm." "Someone had to." "You could have died." "But I didn't." He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed her shoulders. For a second she thought he might shake her. Instead, he pulled her against him, held her so tight she could barely breathe. "Don't ever do that again," he said into her hair. "Don't ever." "I can't promise that." Her voice was muffled against his chest. "I can't be the kind of woman who stays safe while other people suffer." "I know." His voice cracked. "I know. And it terrifies me." They stood like that for a long moment, wet and muddy and holding on. When Adrian finally pulled back, his eyes were too bright. "Catherine died because I wasn't there," he said quietly. "I was in London, handling business that seemed important at the time, and she died alone, in pain, calling for me. I swore I'd never—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I can't lose someone else. I can't." Understanding crashed over Scarlett like the floodwater. "That's why you push everyone away. That's why you control everything." "If I control it, it can't surprise me. It can't—" He stopped again, turned away. "You think I'm cruel, cold, but I'm just trying to survive. By not living at all. It's worked for 7 years." "Has it?" She moved around to face him. "Because from where I'm standing, you look exhausted, like you've been holding your breath for so long you've forgotten how to breathe." He laughed bitterly. "And you think you can fix me? Save me with your optimism and your dangerous horse rides and your bleeding heart for every tenant with a sob story?" "No." Her voice was gentle. "I think you're the only one who can fix yourself. But I think you don't have to do it alone anymore." Something in his expression shifted, softened. For the first time since she'd met him, Adrian looked at her like she was real. Not a duty or a transaction, but a person. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "How to let someone in." "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." He lifted a hand, hesitated, then touched her face. Just a brush of fingers against her cheek, but it sent electricity through her. "You're shivering," he said. "I'm cold. You need to rest. You've been running on fury and stubbornness for days. Welcome to my normal state." That startled a real laugh out of him, rough and unpracticed, but genuine. "I'm starting to see that." He left her by the fire, ordered food sent up, checked on her twice before midnight. And for the first time since the wedding, Scarlett went to sleep feeling something other than trapped. She felt seen. The celebration was short-lived. 2 days after the flood, Mr. Graves requested a meeting. Scarlett found him in the estate office with 3 of the older tenant farmers, men whose families had been on Blackthorn land for generations. "Your Grace," Graves's tone was formal, cold. "These gentlemen have concerns they wish to raise with you." The oldest farmer, Thomas Wickham, she remembered, stepped forward, cap in hand but expression hard. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but there's been talk about the changes you're making." "What kind of talk?" "That you're going soft on the delinquent tenants, giving special treatment to some families while the rest of us work hard and pay on time." He shifted his weight. "Don't seem fair, if you'll excuse me saying so." Scarlett kept her expression neutral. "The families receiving assistance are those facing genuine hardship, medical expenses, crop failures, circumstances beyond their control. No one is getting special treatment. We're helping people through temporary crises." "Aye, but who decides what's temporary and what's just poor management?" Another farmer spoke up. "The Millers have been struggling for years. At some point, isn't it their own fault?" "Their daughter has consumption, and that's tragic, Your Grace, truly. But if we all got extensions every time something went wrong, where would it end? Rules exist for a reason." She'd heard those words before, from Adrian, weeks ago. Now here they were coming back to her from the people she'd been trying to help. "I understand your concerns," she said carefully. "But, with respect, Your Grace, I don't think you do." Wickham's voice was harder now. "You came here from London, married the Duke, started changing things without understanding how we've always done them. His Grace's father tried your way, nearly bankrupted the estate. His Grace set things right by being firm. Fair, but firm. Now you're undoing all of that. I'm trying to show compassion. Compassion doesn't pay bills, doesn't keep roofs over heads." Graves spoke now, and Scarlett saw the satisfaction in his eyes. "The other tenants are upset, Your Grace. They feel you're rewarding failure and punishing success. Several have threatened to break their leases and move to neighboring estates." The threat was clear. Step back or watch everything fall apart. Scarlett looked at each face. Men who should have been on her side, should have seen what she was trying to build. But all she saw was suspicion and resentment. "I'll take your concerns under advisement," she said quietly. "Thank you for bringing them to my attention." They left. Scarlett sat in the office, surrounded by the ledgers and plans she'd worked so hard on, and felt the walls closing in again. She'd been so sure she was doing the right thing, helping people, making things better. But what if she was wrong? What if her idealism was just naivety, and she was about to destroy the fragile stability Adrian had spent years building? She was still sitting there when Adrian found her an hour later. "I heard," he said. "Of course you did. I'm sure Graves couldn't wait to tell you." He sat across from her. "He thinks you're making a mistake." "And you? What do you think?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "I think change is hard. I think you're challenging a system that's been in place for decades, and people don't like having their assumptions questioned." He paused. "But I also think you're right." She looked up, startled. "What?" "About the compassion, about treating people like people instead of numbers on a ledger. I've been thinking about what you said, about this place being empty." He ran a hand through his hair. "You were right. I've been so focused on control that I forgot what I was supposed to be controlling for. This estate exists to support the people who live and work here, not the other way around." "Then why are they fighting me?" "Because they're scared. Because Wickham and the others remember my father's failures. Because change means risk, and they've got families to feed." He reached across the table, covered her hand with his. "But that doesn't mean we stop. It means we show them it can work. We prove the numbers add up. We make this estate thrive while also taking care of people. And if we can't, then we fail together. But I'd rather fail trying to do something good than succeed at being cruel." Scarlett stared at him, at this man who'd been so cold and controlled when she'd met him, now sitting here and choosing hope over fear. "When did you get so brave?" she asked. "When I married a woman who refuses to accept that walls can't be knocked down." He squeezed her hand. "We'll do this right, Scarlett. Both of us. No more me disappearing to London. No more you making decisions alone. Partners." "Partners," she agreed. It should have been a moment of triumph, of connection. Instead, it was the calm before the hurricane. What? The next morning, Scarlett woke to shouting. She threw on a robe and ran downstairs to find the entrance hall full of people, tenant farmers, household staff, even some villagers from beyond the estate. And at the center of it all, Lady Thornfield, dressed in black and holding court like a queen. "There she is," the older woman announced, "the Duchess who thinks she can overturn centuries of tradition with her radical ideas." "What is this?" Scarlett demanded.
"What are you doing in my house?" "Your house?" Lady Thornfield's laugh was sharp. "My dear girl, this house belongs to the Duke of Blackthorn. You're merely a temporary resident, and these good people have come to demand that you stop your dangerous experiments before you ruin them all." Adrian appeared on the stairs behind Scarlett, still in his shirt sleeves. "Lady Thornfield, you will leave. Now." "I will not. Not until this farce ends." She turned to the assembled crowd. "Tell them.
"Tell the Duke what you told me." Wickham stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Your Grace, we can't support what the Duchess is doing. The changes she's making, they're going to bankrupt the estate. We've got families to think about, futures to protect. And we can't do that if everything falls apart because your wife wants to play at being charitable." "Play at being charitable?" Scarlett's voice was dangerously quiet. "I've been working day and night to help people who are struggling by giving them handouts instead of teaching them responsibility," Lady Thornfield cut in. "You're creating a culture of dependence, making them weak. Your husband understood this. He ran this estate properly until you arrived and convinced him to abandon his principles." "His principles?" Scarlett moved down the stairs, fury making her reckless. "You mean his fear? His need to control everything because he's terrified of losing anyone else?" The crowd went silent. Even Lady Thornfield looked taken aback. Adrian's voice came from behind her, very quiet. "Scarlett," but she was too angry to stop. "You want to know the truth, the real truth? This estate was dying long before I arrived. Oh, it was profitable on paper, but it was empty, soulless, a machine that ground people up and spit them out. And yes, I'm changing things. Yes, I'm showing compassion because that's what human beings deserve. To be treated like they matter, not like assets to be managed." "And who are you to decide that?" Lady Thornfield shot back. "A girl from London who married above her station and now thinks she understands everything about running a country estate? You're a child playing dress-up, and you're going to destroy everything in the process. Better to destroy something broken than preserve it out of cowardice." The slap came fast, Lady Thornfield's hand connecting with Scarlett's cheek, hard enough to snap her head sideways. The crowd gasped. For a moment, no one moved. Then Adrian was there, stepping between them, his voice colder than Scarlett had ever heard it. "Get out of my house, all of you, now." "Your Grace, we only came because—" "I don't care why you came. You come into my home, attack my wife, and dare to tell me how to run my estate?" He looked at each face in the crowd. "I've been lenient, fair, given you opportunities to speak your concerns properly. Instead, you let this woman," he gestured at Lady Thornfield, "turn you into a mob. So here's what's going to happen. Anyone who doesn't support the changes my wife and I are making can break their lease. I'll give you fair terms and a month to relocate. But if you stay, you accept that we're doing things differently now. No more debate, no more challenges. My decision is final." Wickham stepped forward. "Your Grace, please, we're just worried." "Then trust me, trust us. We know what we're doing." Adrian's voice softened slightly. "I understand fear. I've lived in it for 7 years. But I'm done. This estate will be profitable and compassionate. It will take care of its people while also demanding that they take care of themselves. And if you can't accept that, then you don't belong here." The crowd began to shuffle out, muttering. Lady Thornfield stood her ground a moment longer. "You'll regret this," she said. "Both of you." "I've regretted a lot of things in my life," Adrian replied. "Standing up for my wife won't be one of them." When they were finally gone, Scarlett turned to Adrian. Her cheek was throbbing where Lady Thornfield had struck her, and her hands were shaking. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things about you. About your fear, not in front of everyone. You weren't wrong." He touched her face gently where the mark was already blooming into a bruise. "I have been afraid. But not anymore. What if they all leave? What if we lose half the tenants because then we'll find new ones, better ones, people who believe in what we're building? He pulled her close. I meant what I said. We're partners now. I'm not letting anyone, not Lady Thornfield, not the tenants, not your father, no one, undermine that. Scarlett buried her face in his chest and let herself shake. Not from fear, from relief, from the overwhelming realization that she wasn't alone anymore. They stood like that until Mrs. Thornberry appeared, clearing her throat. Your Grace? There's someone at the door. She says it's urgent. Who? Mrs. Harrison. The baby's coming, for real this time. And the midwife can't get through. The roads are still flooded from the storm. Scarlett and Adrian looked at each other. The doctor? Adrian asked. Out at the Thompson farm. Their son broke his leg. Won't be back for hours. Scarlett made the decision. Get Mrs. Harrison inside. Put her in one of the ground floor guest rooms. I'll help deliver the baby. You? Mrs. Thornberry looked shocked. Your Grace, you can't. I've helped birth foals. Can't be that different. It was a lie. She had no idea if that was true, but someone had to do something. Get me clean linens, hot water, and anything else you'd prepare for a birth. Move. The next 3 hours were a blur of pain and fear and stubborn determination. Mrs. Harrison labored hard, screaming through contractions that seemed to tear her apart. Scarlett held her hand, talked her through it, pretended she knew what she was doing, even as panic clawed at her throat. Adrian appeared in the doorway once, took one look at the scene, and went pale. Is there anything? Unless you can deliver a baby, no. Scarlett didn't look away from Mrs. Harrison. Send someone for the doctor. Even if he's busy, we need him. He left. Came back with updates. The doctor was coming as fast as he could. The roads were clearing. Hold on. And then when Scarlett was starting to think they were going to lose both mother and child, something shifted. Mrs. Harrison screamed one final time, and suddenly there was a baby, tiny and perfect and wailing at the top of its lungs. Scarlett caught the infant, wrapped it in clean linen, placed it in its mother's arms. Mrs. Harrison was crying, laughing, exhausted beyond measure. A girl, she breathed. I have a girl. You have a fighter, Scarlett corrected, watching the baby's tiny fists wave. She's strong. The doctor arrived 20 minutes later, checked both mother and child, and pronounced them healthy. Tired, but healthy. When Scarlett finally left the room, covered in blood and shaking with exhaustion, Adrian was waiting in the hallway. You did it, he said. We did it. She looked down at her ruined dress. I need a bath, and possibly a drink, or 10. Scarlett, he caught her hand. What you did today, for Mrs. Harrison, for the estate, standing up to that mob, you were extraordinary. I was terrified. Brave and terrified aren't opposites. They're companions. He pulled her close, kissed her forehead. You're the strongest person I've ever met, and I'm... The rest of his words were cut off by a commotion from the entrance hall, shouting, the sound of something breaking. They ran downstairs to find smoke pouring through the front door. The stables were on fire. Scarlett ran. She didn't think, didn't hesitate, just lifted her skirts and sprinted toward the stables with Adrian half a step behind her. The smoke was thick, black, pouring from the building like a living thing. Through it, she could hear the horses screaming. Storm! The name tore from her throat. John staggered out of the smoke, coughing, face streaked with soot. Can't get to the back stalls, Your Grace. The fire's too hot. We've got 6 horses still trapped. Scarlett was already moving past him, into the smoke and heat. Adrian grabbed her arm. You can't. Like hell I can't. She yanked free and plunged into the burning building. The heat slammed into her like a wall. Smoke filled her lungs, made her eyes water, but she pushed forward. The front stalls were empty. John and the stable hands had gotten those horses out first. But toward the back, where the breeding mares and Storm were kept, flames licked up the walls. Storm's screams cut through everything else. Pure terror, pure fury. Scarlett stumbled through smoke to the mare's stall. The door was jammed, warped from heat. She yanked at it, burned her hands on the metal latch, kept pulling. Behind her, Adrian appeared with an axe. Move! He brought it down on the doorframe once, twice, 3 times. The wood splintered. Scarlett shoved the door open and Storm bolted past her, wild-eyed and panicked, but alive. "Get her out!" Adrian shouted, already moving to the next stall. But Scarlett saw the beam starting to give way overhead, saw it happening in the kind of slow-motion clarity that comes right before disaster. "Adrian, move!" He looked up, saw it, dove backward as the burning timber crashed down exactly where he'd been standing, sending up a shower of sparks and cutting off access to the last 3 stalls. The horses on the other side were still screaming. "We can't reach them," Adrian said, voice raw from smoke. "We have to go. There's another entrance, the feed room." Scarlett was already moving, keeping low where the air was clearer. "Through the back. It'll be completely engulfed. Then we better hurry." They ran together, through corridors filling with smoke, past stalls already empty and one starting to catch fire. The feed room door was hot to the touch. Adrian kicked it open and they stumbled through into chaos. The back section was an inferno, but between them and the trapped horses was a narrow path, not clear, but passable if they were fast and very lucky. "I'll get the first 2, Adrian said. "You get the third." "Which one?" "The pregnant mare. She won't move for anyone but you." He was right. Scarlett had been working with Lady, a sweet-tempered bay mare heavy with foal, for weeks. She knew her, trusted her. They moved fast. Adrian got 2 horses out, both fighting him but too scared to think clearly. Scarlett reached Lady's stall and found the mare pressed into the corner, trembling. "Hey, sweet girl, I know you're scared, but we have to go, right now." She got the stall door open, approached slowly despite the fire raging around them. Lady's eyes rolled, showing white. "I'm not leaving you. Come on, trust me." The mare took 1 step, another. Scarlett grabbed her halter and pulled, and suddenly they were moving out of the stall, through the feed room, toward the main corridor where the air was slightly less deadly, and then the ceiling gave way. Scarlett threw herself forward, pulling Lady with her. They made it through, but burning debris crashed down behind them, blocking the path completely. On the other side, she heard Adrian shouting her name. "I'm okay, keep going!" But she wasn't okay. Not really. Her dress was singed, her hands were burned, and smoke was filling her lungs so fast she could barely see. She got Lady to the main entrance, shoved her out into the night air where hands grabbed her halter and pulled her to safety. Scarlett turned back, started counting horses in the yard. 12. They'd saved 12. But Storm was missing. "Where's the gray mare?" she demanded, grabbing John's arm. "Bolted into the woods, Your Grace. She was half mad with fear." Scarlett didn't wait to hear more. She ran toward the tree line, calling Storm's name, coughing so hard she could barely breathe. Behind her, the stable collapsed in on itself with a sound like the world ending. She found Storm 100 yards into the woods, tangled in brush and bleeding from a dozen cuts, still wild-eyed and panicked. Scarlett approached carefully, hands out. "Easy, it's over. You're safe." The mare's sides were heaving, foam flecking her mouth. But when Scarlett touched her, she didn't bolt, just stood there, trembling. "Good girl. Let's go home." She led Storm back to find organized chaos. Adrian was directing the bucket brigade, trying to contain the fire before it spread to other buildings. The household staff had formed a line from the well. Tenant farmers had appeared from nowhere, helping however they could. Mrs. Thornberry saw Scarlett and gasped. "Your Grace, you're bleeding." "I'm fine. Where do you need me?" "Inside. You need the doctor." "The doctor's with Mrs. Harrison." I said, "Where do you need me?" The housekeeper pointed at a group of horses milling in panic. Someone needs to calm them before they hurt themselves. Scarlett handed Storm to a stable hand and moved to the other horses, talking them down one by one. Her voice was hoarse from smoke, her hands shaking, but she kept going, kept working. It took 3 hours to get the fire under control. By the time the last ember was doused, the stables were gone, just a smoking ruin and the acrid smell of burned wood and lost livelihood. Adrian found Scarlett sitting on the ground near the horse paddock, covered in soot and ash, hands wrapped in makeshift bandages. He sank down beside her without a word. For a long moment, they just sat there, breathing. "Everyone's accounted for?" Scarlett finally asked. "Horses, yes. 16 saved, 2 lost in the initial blaze before we even knew it was happening." His voice was rough. "Staff all safe. No serious injuries except your hands. They'll heal." You could have died in there. So could you. He turned to look at her, and in the firelight she saw something raw in his expression. When that beam fell and I couldn't reach you, when I thought... He stopped, swallowed hard. I've already lost one wife. I can't... I'm not Catherine. Scarlett took his hand with her bandaged ones. And I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me. Good. He pulled her against him, and they sat like that while the ruins smoldered and the first light of dawn started to break over the eastern hills. A figure approached. One of the tenants, a younger man named William Carter. He stopped a few feet away, cap in hand. Your Grace, your Graces, I mean. I wanted to say... He looked uncomfortable. What you did tonight, getting the horses out, risking your lives, that took real courage. It was necessary, Adrian said. Maybe, but it was brave too. And I wanted you to know some of us see what you're trying to do, with the changes and all. It's not all of us who stood with Lady Thornfield. Some of us think maybe it's time things were done different. He left before they could respond, but 10 minutes later another tenant came, then another. By the time the sun was fully up, a dozen families had come to offer support, to help with cleanup, to say they were staying. It wasn't everyone, but it was enough. The investigation into the fire's cause took 2 days. Mr. Graves conducted it personally, interviewing everyone who'd been near the stables that evening. His conclusion was presented in the estate office with Adrian, Scarlett, and the local magistrate present. Arson, Graves said flatly. Someone deliberately set the fire. We found evidence of accelerant, lamp oil, in 3 different locations. And this. He placed a piece of fabric on the desk. Expensive fabric, black silk. Found it snagged on a nail near the feed room entrance. Someone was in a hurry leaving and didn't notice it tearing. The magistrate examined it. This is quality material, not something a common laborer would wear. No, Graves agreed. It's the kind of fabric a wealthy woman might wear. The implication hung in the air. Scarlett felt Adrian tense beside her. You're suggesting Lady Thornfield tried to burn down my stables? Adrian's voice was dangerously quiet. I'm saying the evidence points to someone of means who wanted to cause significant damage to this estate. Graves met his eyes. And we all know who's been most vocal in her opposition to the changes here. Speculation isn't proof. No, but it's enough to ask questions. The magistrate stood. Your Grace, if you'll permit it, I'd like to call on Lady Thornfield, formally. See what she has to say about her whereabouts that evening. Adrian nodded. Do what you need to do. They left, and Scarlett finally let herself sink into a chair. She wouldn't. Even Lady Thornfield wouldn't go that far, would she? I don't know what people will do when they're desperate to maintain control. Adrian moved to the window, stared out at the ruined stables. But if she did this, if she put lives at risk because she disagreed with our choices, then we make sure she faces consequences. And if we can't prove it? Scarlett stood, moved to stand beside him. Then we rebuild anyway. Bigger. Better. We make this estate thrive so well that her petty cruelty becomes irrelevant. He looked at her. You're not going to let this break you, are you? I've been broken before. By my father, by this marriage when it started, by every person who told me I wasn't enough. She squared her shoulders. I learned to forge myself back together stronger. Lady Thornfield isn't going to be the one who shatters me. Not now. When did you get so unbreakable? When I married a man stubborn enough to match me. She smiled slightly. We're going to be fine, Adrian, both of us. This estate. All of it. How can you be so sure? Because I refuse to accept any other outcome. The magistrate returned that evening with interesting news. Lady Thornfield had an alibi. She'd been at dinner with the vicar and his wife, well documented and unshakable. But her coachman had been notably absent that evening, claiming illness. When questioned, he'd cracked within minutes. Lady Thornfield hadn't set the fire herself, but she'd paid him to do it. Paid him well, with the promise of more if the damage was significant enough to teach those upstart fools a lesson. The coachman was arrested. Lady Thornfield, facing charges of conspiracy and arson, fled to her London townhouse before the magistrate could formally bring her in for questioning. She'll face trial eventually, the magistrate said, but it could take months, years even, if she has good lawyers. These things move slowly when the aristocracy is involved. Let it move slowly,
Scarlett said. As long as she's gone from here, that's enough for now.
After the magistrate left, Adrian poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. To survival, he said, to burning it all down and building it better. She clinked her glass against his. They drank. The liquor burned, but it was a good burn. Clean. The stables will take months to rebuild, Adrian said. We'll need to board most of the horses elsewhere in the meantime. It's going to be expensive. How expensive? He named a figure that made her wince, but then she thought about the ledgers, about the numbers she'd been studying for weeks. We can do it, she said, if we redirect some of the surplus from the home farm, cut back on some of the less essential expenses. And if we do it right, build bigger, more efficient, we could actually make the stables profitable. Breeding operation, maybe? Training hunters for sale. Adrian looked at her. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about a lot of things, like how this estate could be more than just self-sufficient, how it could actually thrive. We have good land, good people, good bloodlines in the horses. We're just not using any of it to its full potential. Because I've been too focused on control and stability. And I've been too focused on compassion without structure. She set down her glass. But together, we could actually build something remarkable. He moved closer, and Scarlett felt her breath catch. They'd been married for months now, had fought fires and floods and social warfare together. But this was the first time she'd seen him look at her with something other than duty or respect. This was hunger. Scarlett, a knock at the door interrupted whatever he'd been about to say. Mrs. Thornberry entered, looking apologetic. Your Grace, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Harrison is here. He wants to thank you personally for saving his wife and child. The moment broke. Adrian stepped back, expression closing down again. Send him in. Mr. Harrison was a big man, work-roughened and uncomfortable in the formal setting, but his gratitude was genuine. Your Grace, your Graces, I don't have words for what you did. My Mary, my baby girl, they'd be dead if not for you, both of you. Anyone would have done the same, Scarlett said. No, they wouldn't. That's the thing. He twisted his cap in his hands. I heard about the meeting, about Wickham and the others challenging you. And I want you to know, my family stands with you. Whatever changes you want to make, we support them. You've earned that. With everything you've done, you've earned our loyalty. After he left, 3 more families came, then 5. By the end of the week, nearly 2/3 of the tenants had pledged their support. The ones who didn't quietly broke their leases and left. Wickham among them, looking bitter but defeated. Your way won, he told Scarlett on his last day. I hope you know what you're doing. So do I, she replied honestly. Awesome. Rebuilding the stables became a community project. Adrian brought in an architect from London, but Scarlett insisted on involving the tenants in the planning. They knew the land, knew what would work practically, and their input made the design better, more efficient, better ventilated, with space for expansion. The construction took 3 months. During that time, Scarlett learned things she'd never expected to know. How to evaluate lumber quality, how to negotiate with suppliers, how to manage a construction schedule. She worked alongside the builders some days, earning their respect through sheer stubborn presence. And slowly, carefully, her relationship with Adrian shifted into something neither of them had planned for. They started taking meals together. Not formal dinners, but actual conversations over food, talking about the estate and their plans and, gradually, themselves. He told her about his childhood, about the pressure of inheriting young, about Catherine and the guilt that still haunted him. She told him about her mother's death, her father's cruelty, the years of feeling trapped. They found common ground in unexpected places. Both loved to ride, both hated social pretense, both would rather read than attend parties. They argued constantly about estate management, about politics, about everything, but the arguments became less hostile and more engaged. And there were moments when she'd catch him looking at her with an expression that made her breath stutter. Moments when their hands would brush and neither would pull away. Moments when the air between them felt electric. But he never crossed the threshold into her bedroom, never pushed for the physical intimacy that was technically his right as her husband. Until the night the new stables were finished. They'd thrown a celebration, a massive feast for everyone who'd helped with the construction. Tenant families, household staff, builders, suppliers. The grounds were lit with lanterns and full of laughter. Scarlett stood watching it all, feeling something dangerously close to happiness when Adrian found her. "You did this," he said. "We did this. No, this was your vision. I just followed where you led." He took her hand. "Dance with me." "There's no music playing." "Then we'll make our own." He pulled her close, and they swayed together under the stars, surrounded by celebration, but lost in their own moment. Scarlett rested her head against his chest and felt his heartbeat, steady, strong, real. "I was wrong about you," he said quietly. "When we married, I thought you were just another obligation, another duty to fulfill. I didn't see—" He stopped, searching for words. "I didn't see that you were extraordinary." "I'm not—" "You are. You're brave and brilliant and stubborn as hell. You've changed this entire estate in a matter of months. You've changed me." His hand came up to cup her face. "And I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung between them, fragile and fierce. Scarlett looked up at him, at this man who'd been a stranger and an enemy, and was becoming something infinitely more precious. "Good," she said, "because I'm already there." He kissed her then, not the formal peck from their wedding, but a real kiss, deep and hungry, and full of months of denied wanting. Scarlett kissed him back, pouring into it everything she'd been too scared to say, that she loved him, that she chose him, that this marriage of duty had become something real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Adrian pressed his forehead to hers. "Come to bed with me," he said. "Not because you have to, because you want to." "Yes." They left the celebration, hands clasped, and went inside together. And for the first time since their wedding, Scarlett entered the Duchess's chambers with hope instead of resignation. What happened that night was private, sacred, two people finally choosing each other freely, with no duty or obligation between them. Just want and trust, and the beginning of something that felt like it might actually last. Boom. The next morning, Scarlett woke wrapped in Adrian's arms, sunlight streaming through the windows, and felt entirely different. Not because of the physical intimacy, though that had been revelation enough, but because for the first time in her life she felt chosen, seen, valued not for what she could provide, but for who she actually was. Adrian stirred, opened his eyes, and smiled at her. A real smile, unguarded and warm. "Good morning, wife." "Good morning, husband." "Regrets?" "Not even one." "You?" "Only that I wasted months being an idiot." He pulled her closer. "We could stay here all day." "We could, but we have an estate to run." "Practical even in bed. I really did marry a remarkable woman." They got up eventually, dressed, went down to face the day, and found a surprise waiting. The Morning Post had brought a letter from London, an official communication from the Royal Agricultural Society. They'd heard about the innovative changes at Blackthorn Hall, the combination of profitability and tenant welfare, the new stable design, the forward-thinking management. They wanted to send a delegation to study what Adrian and Scarlett had built, to potentially use it as a model for other estates across England. "We're going to be famous," Scarlett said, reading the letter twice to make sure she understood correctly. "We're going to be scrutinized," Adrian corrected. But he was smiling, every decision questioned, every choice examined. "Good. Let them look. Let them see what's possible when you treat people like they matter." He kissed her temple. "You're going to change the world, aren't you?" "We are. Together." The delegation arrived 3 weeks later, serious men in expensive coats who walked the estate, interviewed tenants, examined the books. They stayed for 5 days, asking endless questions, taking copious notes. Their final report, delivered to Adrian and Scarlett in the library, was glowing. "Unprecedented," the lead delegate said. "You've managed to increase profitability by 18% while simultaneously improving tenant welfare. The retention rates are remarkable. The efficiency gains in the new stable design alone could revolutionize how breeding operations are run across the country." "We had good help," Scarlett said, thinking of all the people who'd believed in them despite the risks. "You had vision, and the courage to implement it despite significant opposition." He closed his portfolio. "The Society would like to publish a case study on Blackthorn Hall. With your permission, of course. Make your methods available to other estates struggling with similar challenges." Adrian looked at Scarlett. She saw the question in his eyes. Are you ready for this? For everyone to know your name, your methods, your success? She squeezed his hand. Yes. You have our permission, Adrian told the delegate. Publish whatever you think will help others. After they left, Scarlett and Adrian stood at the library window, looking out over the estate they'd fought so hard to transform. Your father is going to hate this, Adrian said, when he hears that you've succeeded, that you've become influential in your own right. Let him hate it. I don't need his approval anymore. She leaned against Adrian's shoulder. I have something better. I have a partner, a purpose, a life I actually chose, even if it took me a while to realize I was choosing it. We both chose it. He turned her to face him. This life, this estate, each other, against all odds and despite every obstacle, we chose each other. And we're going to keep choosing each other, every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. They kissed, and Scarlett felt the truth of it settle into her bones. This marriage that had started as a prison had become her greatest freedom. This man she'd resented had become her fiercest ally. This estate she'd been exiled to had become home. The wildfire her father had tried to contain had burned through every cage and emerged stronger, brighter, unstoppable. And she was just getting started. Winter came to Blackthorn Hall with snow that turned the estate into something from a fairy tale. All white fields and frost-covered trees and smoke rising from cottage chimneys. Scarlett stood at the bedroom window, watching the sun rise over it all, one hand resting on her belly, where new life was just beginning to make itself known. She hadn't told Adrian yet. Wanted to be sure. Wanted to have this secret to herself for just a little longer. But she knew. The same way she'd known Storm was worth saving, the same way she'd known this estate could be transformed, she knew. A child. Their child. Growing inside her even as everything else they'd built continued to grow around them. You're up early. Adrian's voice came from the bed, rough with sleep. Couldn't sleep, too much on my mind. He got up, came to stand behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. Good thoughts or bad ones? Good. Mostly. She leaned back against him. The Royal Agricultural Society publication comes out next week. We're going to have visitors, lots of them, people wanting to see what we've done here. Regretting giving them permission? No, but wondering if we're ready for that level of scrutiny. She turned in his arms. What if we can't live up to the expectations? What if this was just luck and it all falls apart? Then we'll rebuild. Again, we're getting good at that. He kissed her forehead. Stop borrowing trouble. We've earned our success. Let's enjoy it. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Thornberry looking flustered. Your Grace! Your Graces! There's a situation. Your father is here. Scarlett felt her blood run cold. My father? Lord Hayes arrived an hour ago with his carriage and considerable luggage. He's in the drawing room, demanding to see you both immediately. Adrian's arms tightened around her. Tell him we'll be down in 20 minutes. When Mrs. Thornberry left, Scarlett pulled away, started pacing. Why would he come here? He hasn't contacted me in months, not since you told him to stay away. I don't know, but we'll face him together. Adrian's voice was calm, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. Whatever he wants, the answer is no. You don't even know what he's going to ask for. I don't care. He hurt you, sold you. I'm not giving him anything. Scarlett stopped pacing, looked at her husband, this man who'd learned to fight for her, to stand beside her instead of controlling her. I love you. I know. I love you too. Now get dressed. Let's go deal with your father. Mom. Edmund Hayes looked older than Scarlett remembered, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his mouth. But his eyes were the same, calculating, cold, measuring everything for its usefulness. He stood when they entered, gave Adrian a curt nod. Your Grace. Lord Hayes, this is unexpected. I'm sure it is. Edmund's gaze shifted to Scarlett. Daughter, you look well. What do you want? No pleasantries. She was done with those. Straight to the point. I see marriage hasn't softened you. He sat without being invited. I've come because I heard about your little project here. The changes you've made. The Royal Agricultural Society taking notice. It's not a project. It's our home. It's a business venture that's apparently quite successful, profitable even, from what I hear. Edmund smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm impressed. Didn't think you had it in you, honestly. Thought you'd either drive the Duke to ruin or get yourself killed doing something reckless. Adrian moved to stand beside Scarlett, a united front. Get to the point, Lord Hayes. The point is that I made a mistake. Underestimated my daughter, sold her to you for a political alliance when I could have used her talents for much greater gain. He looked at Scarlett. I want you to come back to London. Manage my estates. With your success here, you could transform my holdings. Make the Hayes name mean something again. The sheer audacity of it left Scarlett speechless for a moment. Then she laughed, sharp and humorless. You want me to come work for you after everything you did? I want you to come home. Use your gifts to benefit your family instead of wasting them here in the countryside. This is my home. This is my family. She gestured at Adrian, at the estate beyond the windows. Everything I've built here, I built it because I was free to make my own choices. Because I had a partner who trusted me instead of a father who treated me like property. I gave you opportunities. You gave me a cage. You sold me like livestock because I embarrassed you. Because I wouldn't be quiet and obedient and decorative. Her voice was rising, months of buried anger finally surfacing. And now that I've succeeded despite you, in spite of you, you want to profit from it. You want me to come crawling back and make you rich? Edmund's expression hardened. I'm your father. You owe me. I owe you nothing. She stepped forward, and for once in her life, her father actually stepped back. You want to know what I learned here? I learned that real strength isn't about control. It's about trust, partnership, treating people like they have value beyond what they can give you. And I learned that the only person's approval I need is my own. You're throwing away your heritage. My heritage is brutality disguised as discipline. I'm building something better. She looked at Adrian, drew strength from his presence. We're building something better, a place where people matter more than profit margins, where compassion and success aren't enemies, where... She stopped. A wave of dizziness hit her, sudden and sharp. Adrian caught her arm. Scarlett? I'm fine, just... Another wave, stronger this time. I need to sit down. Adrian helped her to a chair, his face pale. Edmund watched with something like contempt. Pregnancy, he said. How inconvenient. Scarlett looked up at him, and in that moment she saw him clearly. A small, bitter man who measured worth in power and profit and understood nothing about actual human connection. Get out, she said quietly. I beg your pardon? I said get out. Out of this house. Off this estate. Out of my life. She stood, ignoring the dizziness. You came here expecting me to be grateful, to jump at the chance to serve you again. But I would rather burn everything I've built to the ground than give you 1 second of my time. You'll regret this. When your little experiment here fails, and it will fail, you'll have nowhere to go, no one to help you. Then I'll fail on my own terms, with people who actually care about me. She moved to the door, opened it. Mrs. Thornbury was waiting outside, clearly having heard everything. Mrs. Thornbury, please show Lord Hayes to his carriage. He's leaving, immediately. Her father stood, face mottled with rage. You ungrateful... Careful. Adrian's voice cut through the room like ice. That's my wife you're addressing, the Duchess of Blackthorn. And I'm done being civil while you insult her in her own home. He crossed the room in 3 strides, got in Edmund's face. You sold her to me thinking you were dumping a problem, but what you actually did was give me the most extraordinary woman I've ever met, someone brave enough to change everything, strong enough to survive your cruelty and become better than you could ever imagine. So thank you, Lord Hayes. Thank you for being too stupid to see her value, because now she's mine, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure she knows exactly how precious she is. Edmund looked between them, at Scarlett standing tall despite her pallor, at Adrian ready to physically throw him out if necessary, and something in his expression shifted. Not quite defeat, but close. You'll both regret this, he said, but the words had lost their power. I doubt it, Scarlett replied. Goodbye, father. Don't come back. He left. They heard his carriage pull away 20 minutes later, and only then did Scarlett allow herself to collapse back into the chair. You're pregnant. Adrian knelt beside her, wonder and terror warring in his expression. I was going to tell you, tonight, I wanted it to be special, not... She gestured at the door where her father had just left. Not like this. I don't care how I found out. He took her hands, and she saw they were shaking. A baby. We're having a baby. Are you happy? She needed to know, needed to see it in his face. I'm terrified, and yes, happier than I've been in 7 years. He pressed his forehead to hers. But I'm also scared, Scarlett. What if something goes wrong? What if I lose you the way I lost Catherine? You won't. I won't let you. She cupped his face. I'm not Catherine. I'm strong and stubborn, and I've survived everything life has thrown at me. I'm going to survive this too. We both are. Promise me. I promise I'll fight. That's all I can guarantee. But I'm good at fighting. You know that. He kissed her then, desperate and grateful and terrified. And Scarlett kissed him back, pouring all her certainty into it, that they would survive this, that their child would be born healthy, that the future they were building would hold. She had to believe it. The alternative was unthinkable. The Royal Agricultural Society publication hit London like a storm. Within a week, Blackthorn Hall had received 43 requests for visits. Neighboring estates wanted to implement similar changes. Agricultural colleges wanted to send students to study their methods. Even members of Parliament expressed interest in using their model for broader reforms. We're going to need help, Scarlett said, looking at the stack of correspondence. We can't manage all of this alone. Then we hire people. Adrian was already making notes. An estate secretary to handle the visitors. Maybe a few apprentices who can learn our methods and help implement them elsewhere. You're serious about this? About expanding what we've built here? You started a revolution, my love. I'm just trying to keep up. They hired carefully, people who believed in what they were doing, who understood that profit and compassion could coexist. The estate secretary was a young woman named Miss Phillips, sharp-minded and unafraid to speak her mind. The apprentices were a mix of tenant children and university students, all hungry to learn. Blackthorn Hall became something more than just a country estate. It became a living example of what was possible when you reimagined the old systems, when you valued people as much as profit. But with success came scrutiny. Critics emerged, other landowners who saw their methods as dangerous, who worried that treating tenants well would make them uppity. Articles appeared in conservative newspapers denouncing the radical experiments at Blackthorn Hall. Scarlett received letters accusing her of everything from socialism to witchcraft. Let them talk, she told Adrian after reading a particularly vicious editorial. They're scared because we're proving their way isn't the only way. That's their problem, not ours. Some of them have real power, Scarlett. They could make things difficult. They can try. But we have something they don't. We have proof that it works. She placed his hand on her growing belly. And we have a future worth fighting for. Right. The pregnancy was not easy. Scarlett was sick constantly in the early months, exhausted in a way she'd never experienced. The doctor visited weekly, monitoring everything, worried about complications. Adrian hovered, driving her mad with his concern, but also making her feel treasured in a way she'd never known. You need to rest more, he said for the 1,000th time, finding her in the estate office going over accounts. I need to work. Sitting around doing nothing makes me feel useless. You're growing a human being. That's not nothing. I'm also running an estate. Or trying to, if you'd stop interrupting every 5 minutes to make sure I'm not overdoing it. Scarlett, Adrian, I love you, but if you suggest bed rest one more time, I'm going to throw this ledger at your head. He sat down, ran his hands through his hair. I'm terrified. Every day I'm terrified. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't protect you? She softened, moved around the desk to take his hands. You can't protect me from everything. Life doesn't work that way. But you can trust me. Trust that I know my limits. Trust that I'll ask for help when I need it. Will you actually ask for help? I'm learning. You've taught me that accepting help isn't weakness. She kissed him gently. Now go do something useful. The Southfield drainage needs to be checked before the spring rains. He went reluctantly, and Scarlett went back to work, but she made a mental note to rest more. Not for him, for the tiny life growing inside her that deserved her full strength. The months passed in a blur of visitors and correspondence and slow physical transformation. Scarlett's body changed, became unfamiliar and magnificent. She felt the baby move for the first time in her 5th month and cried at the wonder of it. Adrian was there, his hand on her belly, feeling their child kick for the first time. The expression on his face was something she wished she could capture forever. Pure joy mixed with lingering fear, hope fighting with old trauma. "That's our baby," she whispered. "That's our miracle," he replied. They prepared the nursery together, arguing about colors and furniture placement, laughing at their own inexperience. The household staff knitted tiny clothes. The tenants brought gifts, hand-carved toys, soft blankets, blessings for a safe delivery. Mrs. Harrison came with her daughter, now a healthy, chubby baby who grinned toothlessly at everyone. "You saved us," she told Scarlett. "Now we're praying for your safe delivery. All of us. The whole estate is holding its breath waiting for this baby." The pressure of that, of all those hopes and prayers and expectations, should have been crushing. Instead, Scarlett found it comforting. She wasn't alone in this. She had an entire community waiting to welcome her child. And when her time came, they would be there. The labor started on a gray March morning, 3 weeks before the baby was due. Scarlett woke to pain, sharp and rhythmic, and knew immediately what was happening. She reached for Adrian, found him already awake, watching her with concern. "It's time," she said. He went pale. Then he moved, faster than she'd ever seen him, calling for the doctor, for Mrs. Thornbury, for everyone they'd prepared to have on hand. Within an hour, the household was organized chaos. Water boiling, linens prepared, the doctor setting up his instruments with calm efficiency. And Scarlett, in the center of it all, trying to breathe through contractions that were coming faster than she'd expected. "Too early," she gasped between pains. "The baby's too early. Early, but not dangerously so," the doctor said calmly. 3 weeks isn't unusual. You're strong, Your Grace. The baby will be fine." But she saw the worry in Adrian's eyes, saw him remembering another labor that had ended in tragedy. "Don't," she told him, grabbing his hand. "Don't go there. This is different. I'm different. We're going to be fine. You can't know that. I know I'm not giving up. I know I'm going to fight for this baby with everything I have. That's enough." The hours blurred together, pain and pressure and the slow, inexorable progress of bringing new life into the world. Scarlett walked when she could, rested when she couldn't, and endured. Adrian stayed by her side the entire time, held her hand through the worst contractions, wiped her face with cool cloths, whispered encouragement when she was convinced she couldn't do this anymore. "You're the strongest person I know," he said during a brief respite. "You survived your father, survived our terrible beginning, transformed an entire estate through sheer will. You can do this." "What if I can't?" "Then I'll be here either way. But Scarlett," his voice cracked, "please don't leave me. Please." "Not planning on it." She gripped his hand as another contraction hit, harder than before. "Though if this baby doesn't come soon, I might reconsider." It was an attempt at humor, but neither of them laughed. Night fell. The contractions intensified. The doctor started looking worried, and that scared Scarlett more than the pain. "What's wrong?" she demanded. "The baby's turned, not quite in the right position. We may need to—" "No." Scarlett knew what he wasn't saying. Surgical intervention. The same thing that had killed Catherine. "Give me time. Let me try." "Your Grace, I said give me time." She got up, ignoring protests, and started moving. Walking, squatting, anything to help the baby shift. The pain was incredible, blinding, but she pushed through it. Adrian supported her, literally holding her up when her legs wouldn't. "That's it," he murmured. "You're doing it. Keep going." And finally, she felt something shift. The baby moved. The pressure changed. "Now," she gasped, "I need to push now." The next hour was the hardest of her life. Pure effort, pure will, pure determination to bring this child safely into the world. She screamed, she cried, she gripped Adrian's hand hard enough to bruise, and then a different cry. Higher, stronger. Their baby. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, placing the tiny, squalling infant in Scarlett's arms. "A healthy baby girl." Scarlett looked down at her daughter, red-faced and furious and perfect, and felt something in her chest crack open. Love, immediate and overwhelming and absolute. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you."
Adrian was crying, openly and without shame. He touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger, and she immediately gripped it. "She's perfect," he breathed. "You're both perfect." "We did it." Scarlett looked up at him, exhausted and elated. "We actually did it. You did it. You fought and you won. You always win." The baby, they decided to name her Eleanor, after Scarlett's mother, latched on to nurse with the same determination her mother had shown in everything. Strong, willful, unafraid. "She's going to be trouble," Mrs. Thornberry predicted, watching the baby with fond eyes, just like her mother. "Good," Scarlett replied. "The world needs more trouble."
News of Eleanor's birth spread quickly. Letters of congratulations poured in from across England, from the Royal Agricultural Society, from tenants and neighbors, from people they'd never met who'd been following their story. But the letter that mattered most came 3 weeks after the birth. It was from her brother Robert, written in his messy scrawl. "Letty. Heard about the baby. Father's furious, naturally. Says you've completely abandoned your family by succeeding without him. I think he's just jealous. I also heard what you said to him, what you built there. I wanted to say, I'm proud of you. I was wrong to tell you to just accept your fate. You were right to fight. You've always been right to fight. I'm leaving the regiment, starting over somewhere Father can't control me. Maybe I'll come visit you at Blackthorn Hall sometime. Learn how you did it." Your brother, Robert Scarlett, read it twice, tears streaming down her face. Adrian found her like that, holding both the letter and their sleeping daughter. "Good news or bad?" "Good. My brother finally woke up." She handed him the letter. "I didn't think he ever would. You have a habit of changing people's minds just by existing." Adrian sat beside her, put his arm around her shoulders. "It's one of your many gifts." They sat together, watching Eleanor sleep, and Scarlett felt the weight of everything they'd survived settle into something like peace. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and earned and theirs. 6 months later, the first comprehensive study on tenant welfare and estate profitability was published, using Blackthorn Hall as its primary case study. It became required reading at agricultural colleges across England. Several members of Parliament cited it when proposing land reform legislation. Scarlett and Adrian were invited to speak at conferences, to consult on other estates, to share their methods with anyone willing to listen. They accepted some invitations and declined others, always prioritizing their own estate and their growing family above fame or influence. But they'd started something. A shift in how people thought about land ownership and tenant relationships and the responsibilities of power. It would take generations to fully change the system, but they'd planted the seeds, and those seeds were growing. 2 years later, Scarlett stood in the rebuilt stables, now twice the size of the original, home to a thriving breeding program, watching Eleanor toddle after a patient mare with Adrian trailing nervously behind. "She's going to be a rider," Scarlett called to him. "Give up trying to keep her away from the horses. She's got it in her blood." "She's not even 3. I was on a horse at 2. She'll be fine." Eleanor laughed, that bright, fearless sound that seemed to fill every corner of Blackthorn Hall. She looked like Scarlett, same wild dark hair, same stubborn chin, but she had Adrian's eyes, the best of both of them. Storm, older now but still magnificent, lowered her head so Eleanor could pat her nose. The mare who'd been declared dangerous, the girl who was supposed to be decorative, and the child who would inherit a legacy of defiance, all three together in the stable that had risen from ashes. "Your Grace?" Miss Phillips appeared in the stable doorway. "The delegation from Scotland has arrived. They're ready to tour the estate. I'll be there in a moment." Scarlett walked over to Adrian and Eleanor, kissed them both. "Duty calls. Don't let them wear you out," Adrian warned. "You promised to rest after the last tour group." "I rested for a whole day. That's plenty." "You're impossible. You love me anyway." "Unfortunately, yes." She laughed and headed toward the house, leaving her family in the stables. But she looked back once, memorizing the image, her husband and daughter, surrounded by horses and sunlight and the simple joy of being together. This was what she'd fought for, not wealth or status or revenge on her father, but this, a life lived on her own terms, with people who loved her for exactly who she was. The Scottish delegation was impressed with everything, The tenant cottages, the farm operations, the comprehensive record-keeping that proved profitability and welfare could coexist. They asked intelligent questions and took detailed notes. During a break in the tour, the delegation leader, an older man named Mr. Mackenzie, pulled Scarlett aside. "I have to ask, Your Grace, how did you do it? How did you convince your husband and all these tenants to try something so radically different?" Scarlett thought about it, about the forced marriage and the fire and the floods, about learning to trust and to love and to fight for what mattered. "I didn't convince anyone," she said finally. "I just refused to accept that cruelty was the only option. I kept pushing, kept trying, kept believing that there had to be a better way. And eventually, other people started believing it too. And if they hadn't? If you'd failed? Then I would have failed knowing I tried to do something good. That's enough." Mackenzie smiled. "My daughter is about your age, spirited like you. Her husband tries to contain her, says women shouldn't involve themselves in estate business. I'm going to tell her about you, about what's possible when you refuse to be contained." "Tell her to burn down every cage they try to put her in," Scarlett said. "Tell her she's stronger than she knows. And tell her there are people like us out here building something better." After the delegation left, Scarlett found Adrian in the library. He was reading reports, but he looked up when she entered and smiled. "Another successful tour? Another group of people who might actually change things in their corner of the world." She sat beside him. "We're making a difference, Adrian. A real one." "You're making a difference. I'm just trying to keep up with the wildfire I married." "Liar. You're building just as much as I am, maybe more because you had further to come." She took his hand. "You know what the best part is? We get to show Eleanor all of this. She's going to grow up seeing that change is possible, that fighting for what's right matters, that strength isn't about control, it's about caring enough to risk everything." "She's going to be unstoppable," Adrian predicted. "Between your stubbornness and my tendency to brood over problems until I solve them, she doesn't stand a chance of being anything less than remarkable." "Good. The world needs remarkable women." They sat together as the sun set over Blackthorn Hall, watching their estate settle into evening. Lights appearing in tenant cottages, smoke rising from chimneys, the sound of laughter drifting from the kitchens where the staff was preparing dinner. A community, a family. A legacy built not on fear or control, but on trust and partnership and the radical belief that people deserved better. Scarlett had been sold into this life against her will, handed a sentence disguised as duty, forced into a marriage she never wanted. And from that cage, she'd built an empire, not of wealth or land or titles, though she had all of those. An empire of possibility, of hope, of proof that the old ways could be challenged and defeated. Eleanor would inherit that empire. She would grow up knowing her worth, knowing her strength, knowing that no cage could ever contain her if she refused to accept its walls. Just like her mother. "I love you," Scarlett said, leaning her head on Adrian's shoulder. "I love you too, even though you've turned my orderly life into beautiful chaos. Especially because of that." "Yes," he agreed. "Especially because of that." Outside, Storm whinnied, calling to her foal, teaching it to run. Inside, Eleanor's laughter echoed through the halls, filling the once-empty house with life. And in the library, two people who'd been forced together by duty sat wrapped in love they'd chosen freely, watching the future they'd built together take shape. Scarlett Blackthorn, had been told she had no choice, that her life belonged to others, that she was property, not a person. She'd proven every one of them wrong. And in doing so, she'd given every woman who came after her permission to do the same, to burn down their cages, to refuse the sentences handed to them, to build something extraordinary from the ruins of what others thought they should be. The wildfire had burned through every obstacle, and it was still burning, bright and fierce and unstoppable, lighting the way for everyone brave enough to follow.